Awesome. Welcome to Yogis Guide to the Enneagram. I'm super stoked that you guys are here. I'm super excited. We have a lot of seasoned yogis and a few fairly seasoned Enneagram people in the room, so that's a lot of fun. So we're going to go through kind of the basics of finding your type. So if you guys know the Enneagram and have already kind of figured that out, hang tight. The stuff that's really exciting for you is going to come in and about in the middle. But the stuff about finding your type, it might surprise you. So if there's something, I always tell people to hold things loosely. If you feel like you know your type, but maybe there are pieces that haven't fit really well for you over the years, then come at it with an open palm, as we do in yoga, and maybe you might discover something new about yourself in the process. And then we're going to talk about kind of what brings people to yoga in their different types and what is really beneficial about yoga for each one of the types as we kind of examine the kind of motivations and core issues for each type. To get started, I'm going to do a little intro on myself, and then we're going to do a little bit of movement so we get settled in and present. But like I said, I've been working with the Enneagram and yoga for about the last 5 years. I started practicing Baptiste-style power vinyasa about 5 years ago, which, if you guys know, it's the very hot, sweaty, intense chaturanga kind of yoga that I let kick my ass for several years. And then about a year and a half ago, I started the process to become a yoga therapist, and through that, my teaching has shifted quite a bit to be more therapeutic. That's been really helpful with the Enneagram, and that arc definitely echoes itself as I discovered the Enneagram and got really into it and started learning about how to grow as my type. So we're going to get started moving, and we'll come just to a standing position at the front of your mat. And you can clear your mat. And anything that we're doing that you need to adjust, then yeah. Cool, so go ahead, feel your feet on the floor and notice the way the mat feels underneath your feet. You can gently close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. Allowing your hands to fall down by your sides, palms facing the front of the room. And gently bring your attention to your breath. Everything that we're doing today is going to be very gentle, very slow. This movement here is really just to get us settled, but first we come into the breath. And gently allow your breath to lengthen, allowing your exhales to be a little bit longer than your inhales. Feel your chest expanding with each inhale, chest, side ribs, upper back, filling. And then gently feel your lower belly drawing in with each exhale. Good. Take a few more deep breaths like this. So you slowly start to scan your body from the soles of your feet, gently moving up through your ankles, calves, knees. Yeah, take any shakes, any wobbles, anything you need to loosen up. Into your hips, maybe shifting side to side, lower back, upper back and shoulders. You can roll them out. Take a few circles with your neck if that feels good. Good. Taking a moment to inhabit your body. Good. And then on your next inhale, gently reach your arms up towards the ceiling. And then as you exhale, slowly bringing your arms back down. Good. Allowing your movement to be as long as your breath. Inhale and reach the arms up again. Exhale, gently back down. Good. Take 2 more, just like this. Your breath, your time. Feeling through the movement of your shoulders, the expansion of your breath. Whatever feels right for you. Good. Wonderful. One more time, take a deep inhale, reach your arms up. As you exhale, soften your knees, gently hinge at your hips and fold forward. Good. Allow yourself to rest here in ragdoll for a couple breaths. Maybe gently swaying side to side. Give yourself a generous bend in your knees. Good. Letting go of the head and the neck, allowing the crown of the head to really fall forward towards the floor. Don't worry, you didn't miss anything exciting. You're good. Good, take one more full inhale. As you exhale, if your hands are bound, release them down towards the floor. And then as you inhale, lift halfway. So hands can come to the knees or the shins, spine is straight, shoulders are drawing back. As you exhale, fold a little bit deeper, drawing the lower belly in. Good, as you inhale, reach the arms up, reaching up all the way. And as you exhale, gently fold forward. Good, inhale, halfway lift. And as you exhale, fold. Inhale, reaching up all the way. And as you exhale, fold forward. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, fold. Good, one more. Inhale, reaching up all the way. Fingertips towards the ceiling. As you exhale, step your left foot back towards the back of your mat. And you're going to turn all 10 toes to face this side of the wall. Good. And from here, you're going to take a deep inhale. Full exhale. Let the arms drop down. As you inhale, you're going to reach your left toes back towards the back of the room. Reach your arms up for crescent lunge. Good. Full exhale here. Sinking into that front knee. Wonderful. Take a deep breath in. As you exhale, the arms come down. Gently pivot back to your straddle. Good. As you inhale, reach the right foot forward. Crescent lunge towards the front of the room. Full exhale here. Just getting warmed up. Big inhale. Good. As you exhale, slowly back to straddle. Arms down. Good. This time as you inhale, reaching back towards the back of the room. Deep breath in. Exhale, back to straddle. Tuning in with the hips. Inhale to the front of the room. And exhale, back to straddle. Good. Take a deep breath in. Reach your arms up. So you exhale, take your hands back behind you. Interlace your fingers. As you inhale, draw the elbows closer together. Lift your heart up. Look up. And as you exhale, gently fold forward. Good. Maybe your hands lift up off your lower back. Maybe they don't. Whatever feels good to you is fine. Working here to open the chest. Find a little bit more energy, a little bit more prana into the chest, to the heart area. Good breath. Good. Take one more deep inhale. As you exhale, relax your hands down. If you have a block handy, you're going to take a block and place it underneath your head so that your head is resting on the block. I'll come around and bring a few. Set it to wherever works. Maybe you have to set it up a little bit higher. That's fine. It's a little funny. If you need an extra block, I can bring you an extra block. Here, set that one on top of this. Good. Oh, yeah. So we don't want to go too hard. This is a gentle practice. No headstands today, especially not on blocks. Good. All we're trying to do is get the crown of your head, the tip top of your head, pressing down into the block. Good. Pressing your hands down into the floor. And allowing just a small amount of pressure to kind of pour into your head. So we're not asking it to hold any weight, just a little bit of pressure. Relieve that pressure point at the top of the head. Allow some relaxation. Good. Take one more deep breath in. Full breath out. Good. As you inhale, lift halfway. As you exhale, bring your hands to your hips, soften your knees. And then with your next inhale, draw all the way back up. You can slowly heel toe your feet back in together at the front of your mat. Coming to standing at the front of your mat, bring your hands to your heart center. Good. Taking a moment to check in with your energy now after the movement. Good. Take one more full inhale. Full exhale. Good. You can slowly come down to your seat. So make yourself comfortable as we get into, well, all my family are teachers, and so I want to my initial thing is to call this a lecture, but that feels not right. So settle in for the talking part of it. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and get started with a tiny bit of history about the Enneagram for people who don't know. The Enneagram is this symbol, the funny 9-pointed star. And the origins of this symbol are a little bit hazy. So people are unsure where it originally came from. We know that it has ties all the way back to ancient Egypt, maybe even to Pythagoras and his crew doing all that fun geometry stuff. But it was brought to the West by a man named G.I. Gurdjieff, who was kind of a self-work, inner guide guru. He was all about self-transformation, basically becoming the person you were really meant to be. And he had a whole school of people that he worked with and taught. They called themselves the Seekers After the Truth. And these were people who traveled the world and tried to glean the most important parts of all of the world's spiritual and religious traditions. So he brought the Enneagram to the West, and it was taught to a man named Claudio Naranjo, who lived in South America, and he was a psychoanalyst. Learning the Enneagram, this symbol, as the way Gurdjieff taught it, which was a map of the manifestation of energy. So basically anything that has ever come into being, whether you're building a house or you're having a child or you're starting a new relationship, there's a process about it. And the process is mapped out by the Enneagram. And that's how Gurdjieff taught it. Naranjo was studying this kind of map of manifestation and started to see how it was showing up in the personalities of his clients, of his patients that he saw. And so he eventually worked with it long enough that he developed what we now use as the Enneagram of personality. So basically, this law of movement and manifestation of energy is playing out in all aspects of life, including human personality. So there's a way in which we all fall somewhere on this map, and we all have somewhere to go. It was brought from South America to North America in the mid-70s by a guy named Oscar Ichazo, who's still working and teaching today. And he really expanded a lot on Naranjo's work and kind of developed it into what we know today. There's your boring history lesson. So let's get into the fun part. So the Enneagram and yoga don't have any historical connection. But there are pieces about the way both systems work that are really important. If you've studied the Yoga Sutras at all, you know that yoga is the state of mind where we've ceased all of the mental chatter, for lack of a better word. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Excuse my pronunciation of Sanskrit. It's a little rusty. But basically, yoga is set out as a system to tell us that we are not who we could be, mostly because we're acting through patterns. From as early as 4 till about 7, we're developing patterns to get us through the world. And yoga says that by the time we're adults, those patterns are not helping us anymore. Those patterns are what cause us to suffer and to miss out on the present moment. The Enneagram is so wonderful in this situation because the Enneagram says, hey, yeah, you're not present, you're not exactly living life to the fullest, but here's what you can do, and here's kind of a detailed list of those patterns that you have, and here's the things to watch out for. So in yoga, we call these patterns, these mental and emotional and physical patterns, samskaras. They're these wheels that play out in us all the time. And the Enneagram is basically saying, here they are. So here is how you habitually think, feel, and act all the time. And then once we can become aware of what we're doing, that's habitual. Those things, you have those moments where I was like, oh, I was totally present. And then you look back and you're like, that situation has come up before. Maybe with a different person or a different boss or a different relationship or maybe a different city. But something about this seems vaguely familiar. And those are your samskaras coming up if we're talking from a yogic perspective. And the Enneagram says if you can keep an eye out for these things and you can pay attention to these things, you can learn how to separate yourself from this reaction and choose to do something different. So the Enneagram and yoga both kind of have really intricate systems for mapping the human system, the human beings. In yoga, we talk about the Panchamaya model, and we talk about 5 different levels of being, 5 different ways that our being comes into the world. In the Enneagram, we have 3, so it's a little bit easier. It's a little less complicated. But what the Enneagram has is 3 centers of intelligence. So you have your head, which most people get, like, yeah, your mind is a center of intelligence. And then a lot of people stop there because we're Westerners and that's how we've been trained to think about things. It's like, it's all up here. We got to know it in our brain space. But the Enneagram says there's actually a few more that we need to really be paying attention to. One of them is the heart. So our emotions, our emotional experience is very much a center of intelligence for us, and we can glean a lot about the world through our hearts. And we also have the gut, or the body. There's a lot of really great science coming out right now saying that there is something in our guts that knows maybe even more than our mind knows. And the Enneagram has been teaching this for decades, which is really kind of cool. Our heads are the seat of all of our thoughts, our planning, our problem solving. The heart is our emotions, our emotional experiences, what we're feeling. But it's also the seat of how we connect to other people. So our relationality and connectivity are all based in our heart center. And then we have our gut center, which is obviously kind of your body center, your sensations, like what you're actually feeling in your body, as well as your will and your actions. Like if you've ever just had the will to make something happen, or maybe didn't have the will to make something happen. It's all here in your body, and so is your intuition. So those things that we talk about, like, I just knew in my gut. It's like, yeah, you really did. You just knew in your gut. Maybe you knew in your gut so much that your head didn't need to know, or your heart didn't really need to know. You just knew what had to be done, and you did it. So these are the 3 things that we look at when we're dealing with the Enneagram. And we're going to kind of get into how we work with our types and how we discover our types by understanding which one of these we use most and then which one of these we use least. And some of you guys, by looking at this, you're already like, oh, I know which one I use most, or I've never seen that guy in my life. Because we all have one. We all have one that is like our go-to. That's the car we drive every day to work, or the pair of shoes that like we always wear. Like I would not be caught dead without my Chacos, except for today. For some reason, I bought new shoes, and so I don't have my Chacos today. I'm out of my comfort zone. I have the tan lines to prove it. But we all have that pair of shoes we always go to. And then we have like our secondary pair of shoes, like where if we need to kind of get dressed up, we can put those on. And then we have those pair of shoes in the back of our closet that we were like, oh, these are great shoes, but you've never worn them. They might even still be in the box, or might still have the tags on them. And you forget that they're there, and then every now and again you're cleaning out your closet, like, oh yeah, that guy, I could wear those. And that's really how it breaks down for our intelligence centers. We have the thing that we're always using, and then we have the pair of shoes that we wear when our other shoes are in the wash, and then we have that pair of shoes that we will almost never wear. And sometimes they're a little bit painful to put on. It's like, I don't like these, they're not very comfortable. So basically what we do to find out our types is we nail down which one are we using first and which one are we using least of these 3 intelligence centers. One kind of cool side note connection to yoga is that yoga has these same centers when we talk about the Panchamaya model. Has anyone ever studied the Panchamaya? Anybody? A little, yeah? So we have the head center in our Manomaya, we have the heart center in Anandamaya, and we have our body center in Annamaya. But the Panchamaya, being made up of 5, also has your Pranamaya, so it's all about your energy, but it also has the Vijnanamaya, which is actually all about your personality. So it's everything that we're talking about today. So some cool pieces when you start to blend these things together about what can come up. But we're going to figure out our types. So the first thing that we have to look at is how to figure that out. So the Enneagram being 9 different types, 9 different ways of seeing the world. Everything's broken down into triads, into groups of 3, which is very neat and tidy, and I like it a lot. But we have your basic triad is what intelligence center you use first. We often say what you use first, what you use most. And then the other thing we have to figure out is which one we use least. The problem with talking about that directly, though, is it's a blind spot. And how do you know if you have a blind spot? You don't. It's blind. You can't see it. Like, that's the thing about blind spots. You can't see them. So if we were to just talk about thinking, feeling, or doing, like which one do you do least, like which one do you like live in least, most people don't know. I personally, I feel last. Emotions are like the last thing on my list. But I was always convinced I was a very deeply emotional person. Like, I cry at movies. I went to go see previews. I took my kids to go see Teen Titans Go last night, and there was a 2-minute preview about a robot dog movie that I was like, oh my God. And so I thought, well, surely I'm an emotional person. When I first got into the Enneagram, I'm like, yeah, I'm like definitely like emotions are top. And the more I got into it, the more I realized it's like, that's not what they mean by being emotional. So some of my favorite teachers have developed this way of looking at your repressed center in what we call stances. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we're gonna talk about triads, and you guys are gonna figure out what your triad is. And then we're gonna talk about stances, and you'll figure out what your stance is. And then I have a handy dandy chart, and you're gonna hopefully know your number. Fingers crossed. The charts are fun, but I wanna like preface this with figuring out your Enneagram number could be a process that takes years, because what we're really trying to like get down to the root of is not so much your behavior, like how you're acting out in the world, but we're getting in touch with your motivation. So what is it that's driving you? And what is it that's really like deep down at the bottom? So some people can take a test online and it types them immediately and they know, and they're like, that is totally me. And for some people, they take a test and they're like, or that's totally not me. And so tests can sometimes be really great and sometimes not. But the process can take a long time. So if you don't know your number at the end of today, I have a lot of resources for you. We can stay in touch, and hopefully you'll get it eventually if you keep working with it. But if you get it today, great. If you don't feel like you're flawed in some way. Cool. So moving into the triads, what we do first. So our triads are based on the intelligence center we use first and use most. So first we have our thinking triad, so the head center people. These are people who are extremely analytical. They're very, they can often be very organized, though not all the time. They're great planners. These are people who have often felt analysis paralysis. Do you guys know what that is? Like too many choices or like too much thinking. And they're people who spend a lot of time thinking and planning before they do anything, before they allow themselves to feel anything. And each one of these triads experiences life through what I call an emotional filter. So basically everything that they're drawing in, everything they're experiencing, and everything they're putting out has kind of this tint over it. Like if you suddenly put on like colored sunglasses. For the thinking triad, that emotional filter is fear. A lot of times this plays out in anxiety. So people with a lot of anxiety tend to be in the head triad. Not always. There are plenty of people with, clinical anxiety who are not in the head triad. But everything that the people in the head triad are experiencing kind of gets filtered through this idea of fear. And each one of the numbers, so there's 3 numbers in this triad, and each one of them is experiencing and dealing with fear in a different way. One of them is trying to be competent, so they're like drawing in everything they can to make sure they always have enough and make sure that they're always ready to meet the challenges that are coming towards them. One number is kind of always planning for the future in a worst case scenario sort of way. These are the people who are ultra prepared. They don't just have a plan B, they have a plan like C through Z. They're like, yes. Like if, I once heard a teacher say that if the ceiling of your house ever fell through, you'd want to call this number because they have a plan for that. Does the ceiling of their house ever fall through? No. Do they need that plan? Absolutely not, but they have it. And then one of the other numbers is always thinking and moving and looking to the future to avoid feeling trapped. So these are people, a lot of times they bring the life of the party, and they might they kind of chronically overbook their schedule so that they can kind of hop to whatever thing they want to do when they want to do it. Like they might make plans with you and then be like, well, this was fun, but now I want to go hang out with her because that's going to be more fun. And I want to like have more fun and more fun and more fun. So you can tell the way that they're dealing with this fear of being trapped or incompetent or unprepared, is different for each number. Is anybody like resonating strongly with that? We got some like hands like shooting up. Okay, awesome. And then we move into the feeling center, so the heart triad. These are the people who are all feelings. These are all feelings people. These are people who walk into a room and they immediately know they can read the emotional pitch of a room immediately. It's like they're swimming in it. These are people who know what people want and what people need, and they know how to give it to them. Do they always? No. Sometimes, yes. These are people who are extremely empathetic and relational. These are people who really want to be connected with you and know where they stand with people. They can be moody and over the top. So you'll start to notice that like for all the good things about an Enneagram type, there's also bad things. And that tends to be where we figure out most about the Enneagram, is like the things that make us go, oh, I do that. I don't want to admit to doing that, but I do that. For the thinking triad, it's that analysis paralysis, just like complete overthinking. For the feeling triad, it's this over-the-top emotionality. These are people who can have drastic mood swings, like pendulum one way to the other. But we all have our good things and our bad things. That's what this Enneagram is all about. Their emotional filter is shame. So everything that they're bringing in, everything that they're experiencing has to do with shame. And each one of these numbers deals with shame in their own way. So one number really wants to make themselves invaluable. They want to be seen as the most helpful. Like you couldn't possibly live without this number. That's what this number wants you to believe. So these people are extremely helpful. Being so emotional and like relatable, they know what people need often before those people know it. And then they're willing to meet those needs like that. One number wants to be seen as successful. They're kind of combating their shame by presenting themselves as the best at whatever they're doing. So they're really working hard to make sure that whatever room they walk into, they tune into that emotional pitch. They find it, and they're like, I'm going to be the best at that. So they walk into the PTA, and they're like, I'm the best PTA member that's ever been. They walk into the yoga studio, and they're like, I am the best yogi that has ever happened to the world. And then they go home, and they want to be the best son or daughter or parents. Wherever they are, they want to be seen as successful. And then one number is dealing with their shame by working to be unique or different in some way. So not necessarily best, but definitely different. They want to set themselves apart. And this means that they can be incredibly artistic. They can be very, very creative. They tend to, whatever room they're in, they tend to stand out. Sometimes in a good way and sometimes not in a good way, depending on how that number is feeling. So is anybody resonating deeply with heart triad stuff? We got some Des, yeah. Nice. Cool, and then we move down to the doing center, the gut center, the body center. These are extremely action-oriented people. Often they will do things before thinking about them. And oddly enough, it tends to work out for them. It's a very lucky triad that can do things without necessarily thinking about it, and it's kind of okay. Not always, but a lot of times. These people are always moving, always doing things. They're very active, although sometimes they're not doing the right thing. They're not doing the things that they should be doing. And like I said, always moving, not always fast, but these people are also incredibly intuitive. So these are the people who will be faced with a question or a quandary, and they know exactly what to do. But they're not necessarily going to be able to show their work, where they know the answer. Do they know why they know the answer? No, they couldn't tell you why, but they know that they're in it. They're right. Their emotional filter is anger. And these are people who, again, each one of them is dealing with anger in their own way. And for some of them, it doesn't particularly look like anger. But one number in this triad is kind of turning their anger inward. They have a really strong inner critic. And they're basically, they want to be right. And they want to be good. And anger, in case you haven't noticed, in our culture is not good or right. Most people frown on anger. And so this type has really internalized that and internalized their anger. And so all of their anger is kind of turned inward on themselves, and they're hypercritical, and they've got this voice in their head like, that wasn't good enough. That wasn't, you should have done this. You should have done it that way. And they tend to come off to other people as harsh or maybe overly critical. But that's definitely not their intention. It's just because they have so much pressure on themselves that it tends to seep out to other people. One of the numbers in this triad wants to forget their anger. They don't like anger, and so they just want to pretend that it's not there. They're not turning it inward. They're not turning it outward. They're just like, what anger? I'm not angry. Everything's great. But what starts to happen if you ignore anger long enough, it gets bigger, and it gets harder to ignore, and then it bursts out. And one of my favorite Enneagram teachers, Suzanne Stabile, talks about it like being a pressure cooker. There's all this pressure building up and building up and building up until suddenly, poof, big explosion. That often this number has no ideas coming. It surprises everyone around them, and it deeply surprises themselves. They didn't know they were angry until after they blew up. Just, whoa, I had no idea. And then there's one number in this triad who's very in touch with their anger and who's very comfortable with expressing their anger and can externalize it very easily. These are people who can be often seen as overbearing, or if they're women, they're the bitches in the office. They're totally okay with telling you what's wrong, and they don't have a problem with it. And they're like, you screwed up, and here's what you did, and it sucks, and don't ever do it again. And then they're over it. So it's kind of a flash in the pan. That tends to happen quite a bit, especially if they're not quite as self-aware, maybe not done enough yoga. Lots of flashes in the pan, but then they're done with it. So if you have an argument with this number, they're not going to hold on to it. They're not going to hold a grudge. They're going to be like, I was really upset, but let's go get beers. It's fine. No big deal. Anybody feeling body center resonating here? Yeah? Maybe? Maybe not? And you have got a little spot on your worksheet where you can write down, like, if there's one that really resonates, or maybe one or two that you're like, I'm definitely this, I'm definitely that, or maybe one or two of these. So you can fill that out, take some notes. And then we move on to our stances. So stances are, like I said, are based on what we do last. And since that's a pretty hard thing to be in tune with, a pretty hard thing to understand and to see, the Enneagram talks about our stance, or our repressed center, as how we're moving to get our needs. And this is actually a super cool piece of the Enneagram. It's based on some developmental psychology work by the psychologist Karen Hornevy. Basically, she mapped out the way that children attach to their caregivers. So it's all based on attachment theory. Basically, there are 3 ways that you can move. There's 3 ways you come at the world in order to get your needs met. And one of those is to move towards people. One is to move away from people. And then one is to kind of manipulate people and situations in order to get what you want. Got some like great eyes there, like, oh my God. It's gonna happen. I have yet to teach this workshop where someone hasn't cried. So, fair warning. Last weekend, I was teaching it in Kansas City, waited till the very, very end, literally teaching the last number. And I look over, and like one of the women was like, tissues over there. And I look over, and like she's bawling. She's like, this is me. And so I have to like hand her the tissues. And so it's okay. Like if you're crying, it's all good. We'll get some tissues. We'll get through it together. Yeah, it's good. So our stances. So the first one that we're going to talk about is the dependent stance. These are the people that move towards other people in order to get their needs met. These people are reliable and loyal. A lot of times people in the feeling triad see a lot of similarities in the dependent stance, but there are some differences where people in the feeling center move into a room and can feel the emotional pitch. Dependent stance people do something similar, but what they're feeling is not necessarily the emotions in the room. What they're feeling is the expectations. So it's something a little bit different. And so these are people in the dependent stance who are keenly tuned into people's expectations and they want to meet them. A lot like people in the feeling center, they're deeply concerned with where they are with you. They want to be like, are we good? Are you good? I'm good. Are you good? I'm good if you're good. Are we good? Okay. That's the kind of the feeling of people in the dependent stance. They often seek out a lot of advice. They can be seen as needy and codependent. So codependency is not exclusive to this type, to these types, but they are, that is something that they struggle with quite a bit. But with that, these are people who are deeply reliable and loyal. These are what I like to call like your ride or die. Like these are the people who are with you like no matter what. Anybody feel dependent stance? Got a few? Yeah, maybes? Okay. Then we have our withdrawing stance. So if dependent stance, I like to use a car analogy. Dependent stance people, when they need something, they're driving into town to go get it. The withdrawing stance, when they need something, they're driving out to the country to go get it. They're like, I do not want to be around people right now. These are people who move internally to get their needs met, where the dependent stance, their sense of self is kind of set out outside of themselves and with other people. In the withdrawing stance, their sense of self is deeply within themselves. So these are people who can tend to be introverted or shy, although not always, and not everybody who's shy is in the withdrawing stance, but that's a strong correlation. These people are very slow to take action. As there's a teacher who says, these are people who are slow to start projects and then slower to finish. It's like it takes them a while to get going, and then they slow down from there. But these people, they have a deep and interesting inner world. So whether that's intellectually or emotionally, they're very they're just kind of inside themselves in some way that for them is very, very comforting. So they hang out inside more than anywhere else. Anybody withdrawing stance? Got so much? Some maybes? Cool. And then we have the aggressive or assertive stance. I tend to like assertive better just because it sounds slightly less shitty. So these are people who, some teachers call it moving against other people. So these are the people who try to work situations to their benefit. These are people who are, they're very comfortable in leadership roles. Often they find themselves in leadership roles without knowing why or how. I am in this stance, and I've often been given management positions that I was neither qualified for nor really wanted, but I got them. They're upbeat and energetic. They can also be incredibly impatient and also can deal with a lot of anxiety. These are people who move very, very quickly. These are the non-stop. These are the people you look at their lives and you're like, how in God's name are you doing so much? That's usually this group. Anybody feeling particularly aggressive or assertive? Yeah? Okay, cool. So you can take a little bit of notes. You can write down which one you feel, which one you're feeling. And then I get to show off my chart. Yay! You'd be surprised how long it took to color in all those numbers. So you can take a look at where your triad is and then what your stance is. And then you should have a sense of what number you maybe are. Does anybody have a guess or an idea of where you might be?
I got 2.
2?
And actually got that on the test.
Okay, cool. 6?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Kind of caught between 2. How do you weigh one against the other?
That will kind of become clearer as we go through the description of the numbers. So what 2 are you, if there were 2 numbers on here, which one are you
well, not so much with the triad, but the stance. I feel kind of deeply torn between aggressive and withdrawing.
Okay. Okay, and then what's your, definitely feeling. So you're either a 4 or a 3?
Okay.
Right? If you're looking at the chart that way? Cool. So that's a great thing to know. And as we get into it, you're going to get a sense of kind of the stronger flavor of each one of the numbers. And you'll notice 4 and 3 are right next to each other. It goes 3 and then 4. That's how counting works. So the numbers that are right next to you are also considered your wings. So there can be a lot of kind of crossover as you get into it. And we'll talk a little bit more about the wings as we get going. Is there anybody else feel like they know their number? Or is this lining up for people who did know their number beforehand? No? No, it's different?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Tell me about it. Tell me why you're mad.
She's getting aggressive.
I feel personally victimized. Do I know myself? I know myself.
Okay, so what did you think you were when you came in?
A 4.
A 4? What do you think you are now?
Well, this tells me I'm a 3.
Okay. 4 and 3 are right next to each other. It goes 3 and then 4.
3. So I'm like,
Okay.
This is fine.
Yeah. So maybe you're a 4-wing 3, maybe you're a 3-wing 4. Well, I mean, got to be open to it.
I'm just gonna have an existential crisis.
Okay, that sounds very 4. Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah, there you go. So anybody else feel like, okay. Anybody else feel like they know their number?
I think I got a 7.
7, okay. You have questions?
I don't know. Well, I thought I was a 7 coming into here. That wasn't for sure.
Okay.
And then now I don't know. I don't know myself up here.
This is the fun part about the Enneagram. You're like, wait, I didn't know myself. Oh my God.
Stuck between all of them.
Okay. Well, we'll go through and because what we're going to do next. So write down like what the chart says you are. Chart might not be right for you. So just, it's all good. I'm not going to be offended if you don't think my chart is right for you. But write down what the chart thinks you are. So jot down any notes that you might need, It's all good. And then we're going to get into the description. So before we do that though, we've been doing this for about an hour. So we're going to take 5 minutes. You can go to the bathroom, you can move around, you can get a drink of water, anything you need to do. Cool? Cool. And we'll pull up the next sheet of my thingamabob from that. We're going to talk about like the descriptions of the numbers. So what it is that kind of makes each number it. This is where we get in a little bit to the samskaras part, like the patterns part of what's happening for each one of these numbers. So we'll just start off with 1 because that's the first number. Some teachers start in different places, but we're going to start with 1. And the way that we're breaking each one of these numbers down is by what Enneagram teachers call their vice and their virtue. So basically, what's one of the bad things about this type? And then what's one of the good things about this type? What parts of yoga they need to embrace to grow the most. And then based on the work of Helen Palmer, we're going to talk a little bit about how each one of the numbers experiences presence. So one of the cool pieces about the Enneagram is that being that we all are seeing from these 9 different places and 9 different ways of being in the world, we have 9 different ways of experiencing the present moment. So if you're coming to a yoga class, like you know that, what we're trying to do is be present, right? Like we want to get present. And the really cool thing is that that's different for everyone. That's different for each one of these types. And so is anybody a yoga teacher in here?
Well, I just got certified.
Oh, okay, but yeah, you teach. You're a teacher. Yeah, you're a teacher? Cool. So yeah, this is a really cool piece for the yoga teachers in the room because if you're trying to help people be present, now you have a whole new slew of language to help all of the different 9 types who are coming into your classes get to that same place. Because we all have different ways of getting there. Anyway, moving on. Here we are, number 1. The vice of the 1 is anger. And you'll notice with all of these vices, the word doesn't quite work. And so we need to massage it a little bit and we need to kind of unpack it a little bit. So for the 1s, anger is more like resentment. These are people who, being in the body center, they've turned their anger inward. And these are people who have a very strong inner critic. And so they're working every moment of every day to be good and be right. That is their core motivation, is to be good and to be right. As opposed to somebody in the 3 who wants to be successful. And so there's a difference, like would you rather win or would you rather be right? And 1s want to be right. 3s kind of want to win, even if they're not quite right. 1s want to be right, even if they don't win. And so they're kind of constantly turning this anger in on themselves. And this anger starts to seep out as resentment towards other people who just aren't doing things right. Don't they know that when you load the dishwasher, it needs to go like this? No, most people don't know that. 1s know that. Other people, not so much. So they're constantly dealing with this resentment. But when a 1 starts to engage in their inner work and working with, yoga practice or other spiritual practices, what starts to develop in them is the virtue of serenity, which is this feeling that everything is okay. There's a deep sense of peace that bubbles up as a 1 starts to really engage with their work. 1s are very interested in things being right, things being precise. And so often in yoga, they're drawn to very alignment-based teachers. A lot of times they get into Iyengar. They're very drawn to the precision of movement and breath. So things that really focus a lot on that, they're very into. If you tell a 1 that it just like whatever feels right for them is right, they're going to be like, no, shut up. Tell me how to do it right. Tell me the right way to do it. And these are people who are going to push for that sense of correctness. But 1s will grow the most by developing a sense of compassion for themselves and for other people. One of the greatest gifts that yoga has given me is this sense of self-compassion and this sense of self-acceptance. 1s are sometimes called the reformer. There's a little like diagram on the front of your worksheet. It has the one-word names of each one of the types. And 1s are called the reformer or the perfectionist. So they're always trying to make things better. And a 1 has so much to learn about accepting themselves just as they are. And so when they can find a teacher or a community that really fosters that, that's when you see 1s really start to grow. 1s experience presence. So they're in the body center with this green. I color-coded the triads for you. In the green, the body center, they experience presence as a felt sense. So it's a very, very much a bodily sense that everything in the world is good and right just as it is. And you'll start to notice as we get into this, each one of the numbers, when they're present, is they're getting exactly what they always wanted. But it's all this personality stuff that's giving them kind of a false positive. So when 1s are out there doing stuff and like fixing things and like telling other people what's up, they think that they're making the world right. They think that they're experiencing the world as being right and good. But really when they can let go of that and be present, then they start to realize, oh, it's already good. It's already right. As they start to zoom out, there's something deeper going on that allows them to experience the present moment as good and right, just as it is. Any 1s? You feeling 1 after that? Okay. Yeah? Yeah. It's okay to not be excited about your number. Most of us aren't. There's one number in particular who's usually like, okay with it, but most people know. So we're now moving on to 2s. So we had a couple possible 2s in the room. 2's pride, or 2's vice is pride. I totally spoiled that one for you. I said it in the wrong direction. But 2s don't look like people who you would expect to be prideful. These are people who are kind of covertly prideful. And the way that their pride plays out is not so much in, hey, look at me, look at how great I am. It's in the fact that they are so helpful and they're so in tune with other people's needs and so able to kind of meet people's needs, they start to act like they don't have needs of their own. And that's really where the pride for the 2 comes in. It's not so much in, hey, look at me, how great I am, but really in assuming that they don't have any needs. These people are incredibly helpful. They're the people who clean up the yoga studio after everybody's left. They're the ones who, if you say that like, oh, I'm short on cash, like, oh, don't worry, I'll spot you lunch. It's all good. And then they'll spot you the next time, and you never really get the chance to pay them back because they don't want that. Because they don't want to be in touch with their own needs. Their virtue, as they start to do their work, their virtue is humility. And what humility looks like for a 2 is getting really in touch with what they really need and then allowing themselves to receive that from the people in their lives. That reception part is so hard for 2s, but that's the piece of humility that they really need. 2s grow the most by practicing svadhyaya, which in the Yoga Sutras, in the yamas and niyamas, is self-study. So really looking inward and figuring out, what is it that I want? Also practicing practice and non-attachment. So a lot of times with 2s giving and their wonderful, generous spirit, there's a lot of give to get energy. Like, I'm going to give you this and hoping that you're going to give me something in return. Do I know what that thing is? No. Am I going to tell you what I want? No. I just expect you to know and to give it to me. And so that happens a lot with 2s. And so when 2s, they're naturally generous. So when 2s can give from a place without expecting anything in return, like really, like deeply, not just like, oh no, I'm fine, don't worry about it. But actually, no, this is mine to do, this is mine to give, and I'm happy to give it. That's a huge piece for 2s. And that will revolutionize 2s' relationships with other people. Because we've all gotten gifts where something was kind of expected in return. It doesn't feel good. And that's a sense that a lot of people in 2s' lives have. Like, that doesn't feel great. And so when 2s can give freely, they open themselves up to completely change their relationships. But that takes self-study, getting in tune with what they need. And then 2s experience presence as an empathetic connection and resonance with the world. So 2s being shameful, they don't know, they don't feel like they're in the world. They don't feel connected to people because of their sense of shame. And so they're trying to work to be helpful in order to be connected. Like, if I'm helping you and you need me and you need my help all the time and I'm always there for you, then we're going to be connected. But when a 2 can slow down and be present to the moment, to their emotional needs, their intellectual needs, the needs of their body, they realize we're all already connected. We're already in this web that you couldn't get out of if you tried. And the only thing that's in the way of 2s experiencing that is kind of this personality's way of trying to manufacture that feeling. 2s, how are my 2s feeling? Yeah?
I just think you're going to relate to all of these that I'm
Okay, and we'll get talk a little bit about that too, for sure. Is that?
Hit me in the feels.
Yeah, hit you in the feels. Okay. Sorry if I'm like reading your mail. It's just kind of part of it. 3s. So moving into 3s, the vice for the 3 is deceit, and this is another one of those we really have to unpack, because for a 3, it's not that they're outwardly going around and lying to people. That's not what 3s are doing. But 3s are the type that know what the room wants and know what the room needs and knows how to give it to them. And so they're really good at giving the room what they want and what they need. They want to be seen as successful. And so wherever they're going, they want to be seen as the most successful in that thing. So what happens and how deceit plays out for a 3 is that they start to believe that they are all these different personas. That they're, whatever room they're walking into, whatever show they put on, they start to believe that they are that show. And so for a 3, it leaves them wondering, well, who am I if no one else is in the room? And that's such a big piece for 3s, is really getting in touch with that. So this deceit isn't about lying to other people. It's about a self-deception. They have deceived themselves into thinking that they are their persona. And so the virtue, kind of the antidote to that, is honesty. So learning how to really get in touch with who they are deep down, you know, what they enjoy, even if they're not successful at it. What kind of lights them up, even if it doesn't make them the best at something. So practicing satya, which is truth, another part from the yamas and the niyamas. And what's interesting about this is that 3s can tend to be people who embellish a lot. You know, they're willing to tell that fish story that starts out here, and then it's here, and then like this, and then like, oh my God, I caught a whale, and it was amazing. And it starts in little pieces for 3s, and so practicing only telling the truth, like, okay, maybe it was like only this big, or like maybe I didn't get, you know, a perfect score on my SAT, maybe I just got, you know, whatever. So toning it down for threes is really important. And a lot of that happens as they slow down. Threes are very fast-moving people. And so they have to slow down. And yoga is a practice that requires you to slow down. What's really amazing, again, like the threes experience presence as the inherent potential and value of each moment. So a three is out there trying to make the most of everything they have, and they're really good at it. Threes are often incredibly successful people. But while they're out there making the most of it, they don't feel it. They're not experiencing it. So when a three slows down and allows themselves to get present, then they realize that all of the value and all of the potentiality that exists is right here. And they don't have to manipulate it. They don't have to change it. They don't have to try and make it more or better. It just is. And it's just their personality that's getting in the way of them experiencing it. Any threes feeling that? Maybe a little bit? Yeah? I will say threes don't show up to my workshops very often. So I would be surprised. But it would be great. I would love to have a three here. It's like, if I pay one, then maybe. Awesome, moving on to the fours. So 4, their vice is envy. Does anybody know the difference between envy and jealousy? No. That might be something you need to work on your own. It's all good. So envy, yeah. So envy and jealousy get mixed up a lot. But jealousy is where I don't want you to have what I have. I don't want you to have my knowledge. This is mine. I'm jealous of it and you can't have it. It's mine. Envy is where you want what someone else has. So envy is, I'd really love to have, your sense of style, or your cool new shoes, or you just got a really great car, and that would be, I wish I had that car. But the way that envy shows up for the 4 is not so much in material things. 4s, being in the feeling, the heart center, are dealing with shame. And they kind of feel like they miss the memo when it comes to life. And so 4s kind of always feel a little bit out of it. Like, life seems really easy for everyone else, but it feels really hard for me. And so what 4s are envious of is not your car or your clothes or your cool new jewelry. They're envious of the ease you have in the world. They're envious of your way of being in the world that seems so much easier than theirs. 4s can also be incredibly moody and over the top. These are the people who are kind of constantly swinging on the pendulum from like ecstatic to absolutely dismayed and deep melancholy. They're very comfortable with suffering. They're very comfortable with darker emotions. Like a lot of them just want to hang out in just the dark side of emotions, from like totally distraught and the world is ending to like it's raining and I'm having a bad day. Like that's where they want to live. A lot of the times. And 4s can also experience great joy, but they spend a lot of their time in these darker emotions because they feel like they have more value. They feel like they're more real. And what happens is they get caught up in these cycles of emotions. Just, like make your head spin. And they get trapped in this melancholy, and they don't want to be cheered up. They want to be in their sadness. And so 4s, as they start to work with their envy and work with their emotions, the virtue of equanimity starts to bubble up. And equanimity is, the ocean is still going. The ocean is still stormy as hell, and you don't want to be out there, but 4s aren't on the top of it anymore. When they start to develop equanimity, they start to sink down, where they can have all this stuff going on the surface, but they aren't deeply affected by it. They aren't swayed by it. They can stay steady throughout all of their emotional changes. Fours grow the most by getting in tune with their bodies. Being in the withdrawing stance, they can tend to be fairly out of tune with their bodies. And so getting in touch with them, yoga is a great practice to figure out what's going on in your body. But they also need a disciplined practice. So they need something that they have to get up and do every single day, even when it's boring, even when it's kind of mundane. Fours hate the mundane. If they're going to go to the grocery store, they want to go to Whole Foods. They don't want to go to H-E-B. I've heard a teacher tell a 4 that their spiritual practice was to go, I mean, it wasn't an H-E-B because they aren't from here, but to go to the H-E-B to buy their groceries for a month. You can't go to Central Market, you can't go to Sprouts, you can't go to Whole Foods. You have to go to the plain Jane grocery store to get your groceries. Because fours kind of feel like they get to opt out of, I feel myself resonating with some people in the room. Fours feel like they're a little too special for day-to-day life because of this big emotionality that they're in. But when they can do something that's disciplined and start to find that like sense of beauty even in the mundane, it's when they really start to grow. And fours experience presence as the infinite depth and mystery of each moment. Fours are very comfortable with these questions of like, why are we here? Why do we exist? Why did anything happen? You know? And they're comfortable with that. And when they're present, they can experience that depth and mystery. Like that feeling that they're trying to cultivate with their personality, with their kind of flamboyantness or their over-the-top emotionality, or they're shopping at Whole Foods for the organic such and such. They're trying to create this depth of life that when they're present, they realize is just here. It's already available to them. Any fours in the room? All right, good. We got some fours. Fours like yoga. Fours like workshops. So I get some good fours in my workshops. Fives. So moving into fives. I can tend to spot the fives in my classes now, which is kind of fun. Like you never know for sure, but you look and you're like, I bet. Fives, vice. So if you've noticed, we're moving into the blue letters. So we are now in the head triad. So these are the people dealing with fear. Lots and lots of thinking, lots of analytical processing. Fives, vice is avarice. And avarice is sometimes translated as greed. And it's not quite greed. Greed is I want it all. And avarice is more like I want to make sure I have enough. And so it's not so much, I mean, they are kind of always pulling in. They're constantly consuming information. They want to make sure they have all the knowledge that they possibly can. And that's where this avarice is coming in. But they don't always do things with the information that they pull in. So these are people who can tend to be slow to act. Just like fours and nines in the withdrawing stance, they're slow to take action on all of this information that they've brought in. They want to be seen as competent. They're deeply interested in like whatever they're interested in. Sometimes fives can have some really weird interests, but they consume all of it. Like they're the people that like they will know everything that like no one on the planet needs to know about a subject, but they know it. So they're the people that you go like you want them on your Trivial Pursuit team. Like if you're playing Geeks Who Drink, like you want a 5 on your team. And so they're kind of always drawing in this information just to kind of like check off a box. But when they start to really engage with their work, the virtue of non-attachment starts to come up. And what non-attachment means for a 5 is that you see this feeling, you see what you're doing when you're grabbing all of this movement. Look at your hands. They're locked in. Non-attachment is allowing your hands to be open. And what non-attachment teaches the 5s is that they already have enough. 5s walk out the door with this much energy every day. And every single interaction, every single, jerk in traffic, every question from their boss takes them down. And it's their goal, it's their like life's mission to get home before they get empty. 5s fear being catastrophically depleted. So they're scared that if they hit empty, like they're utterly terrified of that. Because who knows what could happen if they hit empty. And so they tend to draw back and be more reserved with their energy. But when they start to realize and practice and develop the virtue of non-attachment, they realize, I can be here. I don't have to withdraw. I have enough. It's moving from that mindset of scarcity into the mindset of abundance. 5s grow the most by grounding themselves in their body. These are people who would prefer to narrate their life from about 3 feet above their body. They're kind of floating up here all the time. And so when 5s can get in touch with their body and in tune with their body, whether that's through yoga or running or CrossFit or parkour, any sort of physical movement, then they start to realize that they do have more energy. The body is the source of our energy. It's where it's stored. And so they start to get more in touch with their kind of reserves as they get more into their body. They also have to practice taking action. Because these are people, again, in that thinking triad who they think and they plan and they think and they plan, and then they research some more. They're all about research. And then they think and they plan and they research some more, and then the thing that they are researching is no longer relevant. The problem has passed. They've just thought themselves into non-action. And so what 5s have to learn to do is realize they have enough information to make an informed decision. And so that comes by getting in touch with their body, getting in touch with their will, their intuition, and moving forward on all the things that they've been researching and thinking about. I love this. I love the ways 5s experience presence. It makes me so happy. But 5s experience presence as a curiosity and enchantment with the present moment. And this is so cool because when you think about somebody who's kind of always drawing in information and always kind of consuming things, it's like 5s tend to objectify whatever it is that they're studying or this information. It's a one-way street and it's all coming into them. But curiosity, and especially enchantment, that's a two-way street. Suddenly they're giving of themselves over to the thing that they are observing, that they're experiencing, that they're learning about. It's not just consuming information to check off a box. It's being in relationship with something, allowing what they're studying or what they're learning about to affect them deeply. And that's a beautiful space for 5s. And they suddenly realize, I do have enough. I can be engaged when they're present. 5s? We got 5s? Yeah? Yeah. Cool. 6s. 6s' vice is fear. And this tends to play out, it tends to look a lot more like anxiety. These can be very anxious people. These are people who their sense of authority is placed outward. They have a feeling that like they can't really meet the needs of life for whatever reason. And so they're constantly looking for authority figures to kind of bolster themselves. They're the people who, some 6s, all 6s are very in tune to authority. Some 6s place themselves kind of wholeheartedly underneath it. Like, you are the leader and I am the servant. I am the minion of sorts. And then some 6s push back against authority. They're like, you don't deserve to be an authority. You're not good for whatever reason. And so, like, I'm not going to do what you say. And so there can often be this kind of push and pull for 6s. Like, 6s will often ask for advice. And they'll be like, what do you think I should do, A or B? And then you'll say, oh, A. And they'll be like, well, what about B? And then they'll start talking about B, and you'll be like, yeah, B. And then they'll be like, well, what about A? And then they'll start talking about A. So there's a lot of kind of back and forth. Some sixes are called the devil's advocate or the loyal skeptic. So you get this sense of like push and pull with a lot of things that they're doing. And it's all stemming from the fact that they're afraid that they're not going to be able to meet life. These are the worst case scenario planners. They're using their minds in order to like make sure they have a contingency plan for everything. But when sixes start to address their anxiety and start to really engage in their inner work, they develop the virtue of faith. And this faith is something that's deep and it's internal. And it's not so much courage. Some Enneagram teachers talk about, it's courage. Like courage is the opposite of fear. And really, no, it's faith. It's this deep trust that they can move out into the world, that they can trust themselves. Sixes they don't trust themselves. Sometimes they don't trust other people, which makes things really hard. But they deeply don't trust themselves, and so they rely on other people to kind of bolster their sense of being in the world. Sixes grow the most by developing that sense of their own inner voice. So developing a sense of their own inner authority. A lot of sixes can go to yoga teachers and studios where they just kind of put themselves underneath the teacher and will do whatever the teacher says, no matter what. But sixes grow the most in a yoga practice where they have a teacher who is guiding them to listen to their own voice. So instead of having to rely on other people, they're developing that sense of internal authority. That's where sixes are going to grow the most. And they experience presence as a strong and stable inner knowing, which is huge for sixes. You can imagine swimming in anxiety all the time. But when you are present and you develop that strong stability within yourself, that's magic. Like being present is magic for all of the numbers. And like that's magic for a six. Like trusting their own inner voice. Sixes, you feeling this? Yeah?
I'm recovering six.
Yeah. Oh, they sneak up on you. So sevens. Sevens, the vice is gluttony. And this is not necessarily just with food. It's not like they just want to eat a lot. Whatever it is, though, whatever's happening in their life, they want more. There's this feeling that they want a little bit more. And so they want more choices. Like if you choose, like you give a seven a choice between chocolate and vanilla, they want the swirl. Well, that wasn't an option, but you made it an option. 32 flavors is not enough for the seven. Like they want more. These are people who might make plans with you, but then also make plans with her, and then make plans with him, and then they're just going to kind of like party hop from here to here. That's kind of like stereotypical seven energy. But what's interesting is I taught this workshop last weekend, and my sister was in the room, and she told me that she was a seven, and I was a little surprised. And she's like, "Yeah, that's why my garden keeps growing, because I always want more plants. Like I can't just decide to have this many plants. Like I need to have more plants." And I was like, "That's really interesting." Sevens can sometimes be pigeonholed as like the life of the party. Like they're very energetic, they're very out there, they're bringing the fun. But sometimes they're bringing the fun to gardening, So it's like these types and these structures show up in all different ways. But when a seven starts to work on themselves and this kind of fear of being trapped, that's why they always want more. Because they're afraid of being trapped without enough. Afraid of being stuck in a situation, so they need more options. But when they start to do their work, the virtue of sobriety comes up. And that doesn't mean that they quit drinking, although some sevens do. What it means is that they learn that enough is enough. They're always looking for more. And when they develop the virtue of sobriety, they start to be in touch with the fact that sometimes less is more. Sometimes enough is just enough. And that allows sevens to slow down and to settle in a way that like you can't get anywhere else. Sevens grow the most with disciplined practice, consistent practice. Sevens often show up in the yoga studio with their Lululemon pants and their brand new mat and their like fancy top, and they're really looking the part, and they go into the great studio and they're out there and they're having fun because they love this like good vibes culture. And you know, they're like, oh, that was the best thing ever. I feel so good. That was so much fun. Let's do this again next week. And then you don't see them for 6 months. They're off doing something else. So it's really important for sevens to develop a consistent practice, to develop something that requires them to show up every day. And another piece of that with their yoga practice is learning how to work with their own pain and discomfort. Sevens don't want to be uncomfortable. It's a really big thing for sevens. They don't want to be uncomfortable. They don't want to be in anything that might possibly even resemble pain at all. Even if you squint like this, if it looks like pain, they don't want it. And so yoga is a practice of learning how to work with your discomfort, and it's so deeply valuable for sevens. And then sevens experience presence as an uncaused joy. And this is wonderful because they're out there doing all this stuff, they're filling their schedule, they're overcommitting, they're saying yes to all these things, they're working so hard to avoid pain. But when they're present, they realize that they're just joyful. And when your joy doesn't have a cause, then there's not a cause to be unjoyful. There's something really deep and magic about that for sevens. Anybody feel like they might be sevens? Yeah, this is resonating. 7, you got 7 and some 4. Okay, that's a common mistype. So the people get those confused a lot. They're like, maybe I'm a 7, maybe I'm a 4. Cool. So moving on to 8s, lust. Lust is not necessarily only sexual, although it can play out that way. For an 8, most often, though, this lust is a need for it to be right now. Not 3 seconds from now, but right now. It's this huge, larger than life intensity that everything they want needs to happen right now. These are very impatient people, and if they're not getting it right now, they're making it right now. They're gonna step in, and they're gonna take charge, and they're gonna create the situation that they need. These are people who are often called steamrollers. These are people who tend to run roughshod over other people. I'm an 8, and I have been called a steamroller before in not the nicest context. And it's not intentional. 8s tend to be the ones who get called the assholes because they are so deeply aggressive. If they're female, they get called bitches. They're the ones who are like loud and proud about their anger. They have no problem standing up to people. They're out there. They can be really in your face. They can be really loud. We were joking earlier before we started the workshop that the only complaint I had at my last job was that I was too loud. I had several sit-downs with my old boss, and she was like, you just need to be quieter. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. So 8s are always trying to create something to meet their needs. They're always trying to manufacture this intensity. They can tend to be adrenaline junkies. And what happens when an 8 really engages with their work is they develop the virtue of innocence. And innocence for an 8, I'm an 8. I didn't get it at first. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? All the other ones make sense, like deceit, honesty, like avarice, non-attachment, fear, faith, gluttony, sobriety. Like those all make sense. Pride, humility. Like, oh, it's just like the opposite, right? And then like lust and innocence, and I was like, what does innocence mean? I was actually much more forceful about it when I first heard it. I was very angry because I did not understand. But innocence is this, when you think about innocence, you think about kids. You think about puppies. You think about people and things and situations who are just experiencing life as it is, like it's the first time. Like that's what innocence is for an 8. And 8s often feel like they had to give up their innocence way too early. And so they're always coming at life like, I got to take care of myself, and I'm going to like fight this battle, and all these things. Like, they're the Batmans and Batwomans of the Enneagram. They lost their innocence too soon, and so coming back around to it in their adult life is like allowing life to be what it is without trying to manipulate it or change it. 8s grow the most by allowing themselves to be led. 8s are often in charge. Often they are the leaders. They are the ones doing the shit, and they got everybody following them. And it's really hard for 8s to surrender that to someone else. And so it's a huge growing piece for an 8 to find a teacher, a mentor, a therapist, somebody who can lead them and guide them. That's a huge thing for 8s. Also, they have to learn how to work with gentleness and subtlety. And 8s can tend to be very dense. They're also very extreme. These are people who want it big, like go big or go home. But when 8s can learn how to work with gentleness and subtlety, that's when they really start to grow in their practices and in their lives. 8s experience presence as the felt sense. So we're back into the green, the body triad, the felt sense of power and vitality and aliveness. So this kind of adrenaline rush that they're always kind of creating is not real aliveness. When they're present, they can feel their heartbeat. They can hear their breath. And that they know that there is a power and a vitality in that they can't get when they're not present to those things. And being an 8 and having that experience it's totally different. It's a deeply grounded sense of power and of energy, where your adrenaline rush is not. It's scattered. It's all over the place. Any other 8s? Feeling? Yeah, there we go.
So
Holding it down.
What would be growth opportunities
For an 8? So learning how to work with delicate emotions. Growth points for 8 are definitely, some people call them the Mack trucks full of marshmallows. So learning how to let the people in your lives see the softer side of you is a really strong growth point for 8s. That kind of opening up and allowing, and it doesn't happen with a lot of people. 8s don't show their soft and vulnerable side to many people at all. They can be very guarded, and so allowing that opening is a huge piece. Did you have a question?
What's the best way to communicate or get a point across to your kid?
Stand up for yourself. Don't him and haw around anything.
I have a roommate who's an 8.
Okay, yeah. So 8s can be very intimidating. 8s can be very, very intimidating. And what an 8 wants you to do is stand up for yourself. If you will meet an 8 in their intensity, and that's hard for some numbers. Like, some numbers have to really work to do that, and then they have to spend a lot of time recovering afterwards, and that's okay. But if you can stand up for yourself and bring, meet them on the mat, so to speak, then an 8 is going to respect you. Don't sugarcoat anything for an 8. They don't want it. They don't need it. They find it annoying. I find it annoying. Don't do that. Yeah, so that's some good things about 8s. And always tread lightly when typing other people. So unless they've owned it, then you can't be sure. Now, granted, there's no harm in experimenting with things, but don't tell anyone oh, you're such an 8. That's super Enneagram party foul. Don't type other people. that is not a good plan, because what you're going to do is you're going to piss them off, you're going to hurt their feelings, and you're going to damage the relationship. Because once you get into the Enneagram work, there's a lot of deep shit. And even if you love that number and you're just talking about all the great things, when they start and go reading into the book and they get into they think I'm this? Oh, I don't have anything to do with this. And then they miss out on a really wonderful tool for their growth. 9s. We can't forget 9s. People tend to forget 9s. That's just where they are. That's what they...
You just stirred up all the 8s, now they're pissed.
I know, right? Yeah. And then we have to really try and get back down to the 9s. So 8s are the number on the Enneagram with the most energy. And then 9s are right next to them with the absolute least. So of all the numbers, like 5s have a measured amount of energy, but 9s have the least amount of energy. And 9s, their vice is sloth. And that's sometimes called laziness. And a lot of 9s, though, don't look lazy. Some do. Some do. Not all of them. What sloth means in terms of the Enneagram, in terms of the 9, is that they are lazy about what is most important. So 9s, if you look on your diagram, they're right at the top of the Enneagram. And so 9s kind of they can see all of the numbers. You know, they're right at the top. They get it. They can see things from your perspective. They understand. Sometimes they're called the mediators. They're very good at like seeing both sides to an argument, sometimes to a frustrating degree. But what 9s have kind of lost is their own sense of how they think and how they feel. 9s are deeply conflict avoidant. These people do not want to be in conflict with anyone or anything. That's the last thing they want. 9s they're really working to create a sense of harmony inside themselves and like in the outside world. A lot of 9s flock to yoga because if there is a tool that allows them to maintain their inner harmony, they are all about it and they want it. They're like, yes, give me more of that. They want harmony internally and externally. And so what tends to happen is they forget themselves. Because if they have an opinion or a want or a desire, it might be in conflict with someone else. And they can't stand being in that conflict with other people. And so this is a typical like 9 situation. This is a great like learning story that a lot of teachers use. So a 9 and their partner are going to dinner. And their partner's like, where do you want to go to dinner? And the 9 says, I don't know, where do you want to go to dinner? And they're like, well, I want to go get Mexican food. And the 9's like, okay. But the 9 hates Mexican food. The 9 doesn't want to eat Mexican food. But they go because they don't want to be in conflict with other people. And what happens is they start to get angry about that. But you can't have anger and not be in conflict with people, so they forget it. And these are the people who tend to forget their anger. And they're sitting there eating their Mexican food, and they're like, that's great. That's great. But they're getting angry, and they're getting resentful. And then eventually, they explode. So the 9s can be very passive-aggressive, like, oh, well, it's lukewarm, or these tacos weren't that great. But after a while, that starts to build up, and then they can blow up. And it takes a long time for a 9 to blow up, but when it happens in a big way. 9s, being slothful, their virtue when they really start to engage with their work is to develop right action. And what right action is for a 9 is knowing exactly what's theirs to do and taking action to do it. Has anybody read the Bhagavad Gita? Yeah, we got a couple. Arjuna, the main character of the Bhagavad Gita, is a classic 9. He spends the entire duration of this Indian epic on the floor of his chariot. Just like, I don't know what to do. Woe is me. And so Krishna comes down, God incarnate comes down to his chariot and says, just do something. Just pick a thing and do it. He's a mighty warrior. It's his job to be a warrior and to fight these battles. But then all of a sudden, his family is the one he's fighting against for all these different reasons. We don't need to go into it. But basically, he feels like he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. He doesn't want to be in conflict with his family, the people that he feels some moral, connection to. But he also knows that deep down, his dharma is to be a warrior. And so he's deeply caught in this conflict. And what happens for 9s is in trying to create all of this harmony, they actually create a huge inner conflict. There's a deep inner rift because they haven't stood up for what they want and what they need. And so they find themselves stuck in this internal conflict. And so the virtue of right action is knowing what's theirs to do and stepping out and doing it. Being in the withdrawing stance with 5s and 4s, they're real slow to take action. And so they have to work to to get to where they're doing what's right and what's theirs to do. 9s grow the most by getting into their body and empowering themselves to take right action and deal with conflict. So 9s can take some lessons from their 8 neighbors in dealing with conflict. 8s aren't afraid of conflict. 9s totally afraid of conflict, and they have to work to get to where they can deal with it. But 9s, when they're present, and they're present to their own needs and are able to voice those, and they can stay grounded in who they are, they experience presence as a felt sense of harmony in and with the world. So not just is the world harmonious out around them, but they're experiencing harmony with the world. They've put themselves in the world. Even though it might cause conflict, they can zoom out and see bigger and realize that what they need is not a conflict or an inconvenience for those around them. And what they want is important and invaluable. And when they can kind of come home to those things, they can experience this felt sense of harmony in and with the world. Any 9s? Anybody feeling the 9 stuff? Oh, wow. No 9s? Crazy. We usually have a few 9s. Yeah, so this is kind of the main description of the types. Are there people who are still like not sure of their number? Yeah, some? Okay.
I think I'm a 4.
You think you're a 4? Okay. Question?
I'm torn between 5 and 6.
Okay, awesome. So this is kind of what we talk about next. So you're kind of deciding between the numbers. If there's a couple that really resonate with you or you're not quite sure, we look at the diagram. So we look at the little 9-pointed star. And what's interesting is it gives us a lot of insight into numbers that can tend to look a lot alike. And I'll flash back. So we have in here a lot of different ways of moving. So you can look at where you're planted. So if you know your number now, you look at where you sit. And so we'll start with an 8, because 8s like to be first. We start with an 8, and we look at these lines that are happening and that are moving to other numbers. And we also look at what's on either side of us. So a lot of times, if you're kind of confused about 2 numbers that are right next to each other, then you might be, I might be an 8 with a 7 wing. Or I might be a 7 with an 8 wing, if you're kind of stuck in that middle space. So your wings are kind of helpful in helping you determine where you sit. But then after that, if you're still not sure, if you're still kind of stuck in between some numbers, what's really interesting is these arrows, we call them the arrow points, tell us what our number looks like in what I call vantage and refuge. Some teachers call it stress and security. Some people call it integration and disintegration. I don't like that language because it's a little too charged. Stress and security is better, but even that's a little charged. Your numbers, the direction of your numbers are not good or bad. They just are. They're just things that are going to happen to you. They're energies that you're moving into. And so I use vantage and refuge. Does anybody know who Frank Lloyd Wright is? So he talks a lot about people needing a sense of vantage and people needing a sense of refuge. And so all of his architecture is kind of built around that. I got to see his home several years ago, and it resonated so deeply with me. We all need it. We all have times where we want to kind of go into hibernation and find a cave to crawl into. But that energy looks different for each one of us, for each one of the types. And then we all have those times when we're on top of the world, and we can see everything, and everything's we're just kicking ass. But that looks different for each one of the numbers. And so these arrows show us what direction we're moving. So for an 8, when I am stressed out or when I need to find my refuge, I go to the energy of 5. So I get a little bit more analytical, I get a little bit more emotionally withdrawn, and I get a little more observant instead of being so go, go, go all the time. And that energy of refuge can be good or bad. So I can use that energy if I'm conscious to take a step back and get a better, more objective view of a situation before re-entering and re-engaging. Or I could use that space to get even more cut off from my emotions and get way more analytical and get tunnel vision. So it could be either or. When an 8 is feeling really on top of it, this vantage place where they can kind of see everything, they're feeling in control, they move to 2. And in that space, they can be in touch with more of their softer emotions. They can, all of this energy and power that they have, they can gear it towards helping other people, much like a 2 would do. Now, that energy of the 2 energy could be good or bad. An 8 who really developed this energy and who's famous for it is Mother Teresa. She was not getting stopped by anyone. Definitely an 8 charging in to Calcutta. But what she was doing is saving children. She had this desire to serve other people. Or it could be really crappy. That energy, that safe space energy could not be great for an 8. And it can become a lot of codependency, a lot of give to get sort of thing. So you can go into the high or the low side of either one of your arrow numbers. So what other numbers we have? Who wants to know their arrow numbers? We're going to 4. Okay, so 4, boop, right here. So 4s in their vantage, so in their great energy, you move up to 1. Then in that space, 4s can become more disciplined and can become more able to take action into the world. Or they can become hypercritical and nitpicky, even at their vantage space, even at this positive energy. There could be a low side to it. 4s move to 2 in stress, where they become overly compliant, and they are very interested in placating people. Okay, I'm going to give you this just to give it to you, just to get you to stop complaining. Or in that 2 space, they could learn to kind of move out of their inner world and see that other people actually need their help, and to allow themselves to be in more relationship with other people instead of just reclusing all the way in. We had a 3. So 3s, 6s, and 9s are on the triangle. So they all kind of work together. 3s in vantage go to 6. And 3s who are super success oriented and are kind of nonstop thrill rides, they're super take charge and moving forward and being successful. When they move to 6, it can be a lot of positive energy in developing more ideal for the team. So it's not just them who's successful, it's the whole team that's successful. Or it can be kind of crappy and they can start to get fearful and insecure. And a 3 who's fearful and insecure is not somebody you want to be around. Really, anybody who's manifesting the low side of whatever energy they're in is not somebody you want to be around. But 3s, when they move to their refuge point, when they need to kind of bunker down, they come into the 9 energy. And this is where they can slow down and relax and stop pushing so hard. Or it's where they get trapped on the couch watching Netflix for months. So there's always a high side and a low side to the energy that you're developing. We had 7, possible 7? Yeah, so 7s, when they are in their refuge point, when they kind of need to take cover, they move to 1. And in 1, they can use that to ground themselves and become a little bit more meticulous and a little bit more organized, or they can use it to become hypercritical. It's kind of, it all depends on whether you're conscious of what's going on and how the energy is moving. When 7s are really secure, when 7s are moving to that vantage place where they feel like they're kicking ass, they move to 5. And in that space, they can go deep with something. So for a 7 who tends to know a little bit about everything and flit along the surface, moving to that 5 energy is great. If they're conscious of it, they can go deep. They can stay committed to something. Or they can become even more emotionally detached. So you have to be conscious of it. That's why we're learning these things, is so that we see them play out in our lives. Then let's see, we haven't done 5. So 5 maybe? Definitely a 5. Okay, so 5s in their refuge point, when they need to take cover, they're moving to 7. And 5s start to act a little silly. They can be a little lighthearted. They can also be a little erratic and a little out of control. And so that's kind of, there's 2 sides to that 7 energy, but when A 5 is really feeling on top of it, and they move into the vantage spot. They move to 8. And they develop this ability to move out into the world. They can become strong leaders, or they can develop the low side of 8 and just get domineering, being overly opinionated and using all this information they have as a piece of control and power over other people. So you have your options as you move around these things. So we did 3, 6 goes to 3 in refuge and 9 in vantage. So again, developing those different energies. For a 6 to move to 3, and it can be a really good thing. Like, oh, I just have to get some stuff done. For somebody who's stuck in analysis paralysis all the time, to move into 3 energy, if you do it consciously, like, oh, look, I'm stressed out right now. Like, I feel like I want to take cover. I'm manifesting my 3 energy. Let's take the high side of it and get some shit done that might make me feel better. Or then you become hyper concerned with things looking good. So there's kind of a high and a low side to all of it. And there's a lot more to this. As 6 moves to 9, they can relax. Somebody who's constantly running these fear things, being constantly afraid, when they can move to that 9 space and relax, it's so good. Or they just get even more lost in not doing things, not ever acting on all of these things they've been planning and thinking about. So you have all of these different kind of movements that you can make. Did I get everybody's number who's in here? 2, yes, 2. 2 is a fun one. 2 in their refuge moves to 8. This is where a 2 learns how to say no. It's a good place for a 2. Or it can be a really bad place for a 2. And when a 2 has a blowout at 8, it can be pretty epic. There's a lot of energy at 8. 2s move to 4 in their vantage spot. So they can kind of develop some of that curiosity, that 2s get in touch with their own feelings at 4. And then sometimes 2s can get a little overly moody at 4. So even if they're feeling good, maybe it's conscious, maybe it's not. And so you have kind of the double sides to both, to all of these energies that you can develop. You have a question?
Yeah, I'm curious about how wings affect the way you move energy.
They don't. What wings do more than anything is they kind of color your type. So I like to think of wings as more like the flavor. Like if you think of it as a color wheel, a million different shades of purple, but one purple is more blue and one purple is more red. And so that's not going to affect how you're moving on these arrow points, but it's going to kind of help you see more nuance in your personality. So that's why people who are kind of caught between 2 numbers, understanding the arrow points can be really helpful. Like if you know what you look like when you're really stressed out, or you know what you look like when you're looking really good, then that's going to give you a lot of information about your core type. So then basically, we're wrapping things up. What happens now is you practice. And you take the things that you've learned, and maybe you read some more books, and you start to observe yourself. You observe how these patterns show up for you. As I trip over my blocks. Glad we caught that on film. You start to pay attention, and you start to realize at first, oh crap, I'm so stuck in all of my stuff. This is always happening all the time. It's going to pop up everywhere. And then after it pops up everywhere for a little while, you start to realize, oh, maybe I could do this a little differently. Maybe I could meet this situation in a way that's a little bit more appropriate. Maybe I can, move more into my emotions. Maybe I can engage in more productive thinking. Maybe I can slow down. Maybe I can be more in touch with my body here. And so all of this information is great, but it doesn't turn to transformation until you put it into practice. And that's why I love teaching at practice, because it hits the point home. What matters, one of my favorite teachers says, we become what we do most. And so in some sense, we've become these types, but that's not who we really are. we've just been playing out these patterns so long, we've convinced ourselves that there's nothing else. But there's so much else. And there's so many more opportunities to think and to feel and to act in different ways. And that's really the value of the Enneagram and studying this. And also doing practice, doing a yoga practice. Yoga is addressing your body, your mind, and your emotions all at once. And so with consistent practice, all of the types, in their own certain ways, can experience a lot of growth where they wouldn't necessarily without it. Some people are really into psychotherapy and they feel really good there. But if you miss out on the body, you're missing out on the body. You also need to bring in the mental capacities, the emotional capacities. And yoga is a daily practice that allows you to address all of those things. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. They do have a class starting in about 30 minutes, so you can stay and hang out if you want to move a little bit more. Shoot another donation to practice. I'm going to hang out for a little bit out in the lobby. If you guys have more questions, I'm totally open. You can take pictures of any of these things. I'll flip pages around if you're interested. I also brought some of my favorite books if you're looking for more reading and resources. I also have an email list that you guys can sign up for. I host a podcast on the Enneagram. I host a meetup that's once a month here in town. And there's lots of really cool ways to learn more about the Enneagram if you're interested. And specifically the Enneagram with these yoga practices. So thank you guys so much for spending your time with me. I appreciate it more than you know. If you would just come to a comfortable seat, we'll close with a short meditation. So gently close your eyes. Feel yourself sitting down into the floor. Allow yourself to sit up straight and tall, pressing the crown of your head towards the ceiling as your hips and pelvis sink down into the floor. Feel your hands resting on your knees or thighs. And allow yourself to take a few deep breaths. Noticing the sensations of your body. Feeling the wind from the fan moving around your skin. Tuning in to your heartbeat. Being aware of any emotions that have come up and have left and are back again. And just notice their ebb and flow. Acknowledging them and honoring them. Being aware of your mind, your thoughts. Allowing them to pass by just like ships while you're firmly planted on the shore. Seeing and acknowledging and honoring all of these things. Bring your hands to your heart center. May we have hearts that are open to love. Bring your hands to your forehead center. May we have eyes that see the truth. Take a deep breath in. Namaste. Thank you all so much. Yay, we did it.